Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to Locked On Badgers. Today, talking about how I think the offensive ecosystem might be fixed next year and make everybody better because of it. Plus, which players on the current roster are helped most by the incoming transfers. We're going to talk about that and, as always, a lot more on today's Locked On Badgers. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, my friends? Welcome to Locked On Badgers. I am your host, Ryan Herrings, as always. My voice is a little out yesterday and today, so I apologize that this episode is getting up a little later than normal. But I think I'm okay. We're gonna fight through it. I do want to say thank you again for making this one of your first listens every day. We're here to talk about the Badgers every single day, and truly, truly appreciative of everybody watching the show, listening, commenting, supporting. Y'all are the best. All right, so let's talk about a comment I've made before. Is offensive ecosystem. I had somebody reach out and kind of ask me just what I meant by that and to expand on it a little bit. And what I'm really saying is the last year, because I want to get into players on this year's current team, last year's team coming back that are helped most by the transfer portal additions. Because we spend a lot of time talking about CJ Williams coming in and he's going to do this and Mordecai's going to do this. But let's talk about some of the players on the roster that are most impacted by these transfers coming in a beneficial way, because I think there's some real tangible benefits for a lot of players that are already on the roster. But first, I want to tie it back to something I've talked to before, and that's the offensive ecosystem, right? And all I mean by that is the entire offense last year was drugged down into the mud, right? Because nothing was working and it made everything harder for everything else. It was like the swamp of sadness in Never Ending Story. If y'all are a little older, you remember that, trying to pull a horse through that. Everything just gets stuck in the muck and nothing can really break free from that, right? The quarterback play wasn't very good, and that impacted the way the defense is loaded up against the run, which made it harder on the offensive line because now you're blocking against 8 and 9 man boxes, which made it harder for Braelon Allen because now there's a bunch of trash along the line of scrimmage, which made it harder for Paul Chryst and Ingram, right? The quarterback's not playing well, so that impacted their play calling, but their play calling also, contributed to everything kind of being stuck in molasses. So all I'm saying is that everything was kind of broken last year. And when multiple pieces aren't working well, it weighs down even the better parts of your offense. And that's really where we've been for a couple of years. And I think this upcoming season, we might finally get to a point where, with a new coaching staff, new play calling, much better play at quarterback, more weapons at receiver. Now you're going to see those incumbent pieces that were already here become better just because the ecosystem around them makes a lot more sense, right? And that's kind of the gist of what I'm going to get into with some of these points. You're going to see the running game, I think, get better, not because it's necessarily a better run blocking unit or Braelon Allen's better, but just because everything around them is working more efficiently, which makes it harder on defenses to gear up, to load up against Braelon Allen. And because of that, it's the entire ecosystem is just going to feel much healthier. And I think it's going to elevate the play of everybody from the offensive line to the receivers, to the tight ends. And that's going to make the play calling easier. It's just this positive feedback loop. Whereas last year, it was really the opposite, right? It was just this negative feedback loop where you almost couldn't pinpoint the issues. You had so many people talking about, well, Paul Chryst and Bobby Ingram are holding this offense back with play calling. And then you'd have another group that said, well, what do you want them to do with this quarterback play? And then you'd have another group that says, well, the offensive line isn't good. And in reality, it was all of it working together to produce an incoherently bad offense. And I think you might see the flip side of that this year. So let's talk about some of the players that I think are helped most on the current roster by these transfer kids coming in, these transfer players coming in. Because again, we talk so much about where they're going to slot in. How big of an impact is Green going to make? Is CJ going to make? Is Tanner Mordecai and Jake Renfro? But there's some real positive impacts for players on the roster. The first one I want to talk about are the two running backs, Ches and Braelon. There was a stat, I think Pro Football Focus put it out. Braelon Allen led the country in rushing yards against 8 or 9 man boxes. That's gone. Like, that's over. Now, in this 3rd and 1 situation, right, you're still going to see a loaded box probably, but we're going 3 and 4 out. Like, we're spreading the defense. We're putting athletes in space. We are done seeing Braelon Allen run into a brick wall of defenders again and again and again. He's going to have a lot more room. Ches as well. They're going to have a lot more room. And not only that, and the room is afforded, by the way, by the quarterback transfer you brought in and the receivers, because Phil Longo can come in and say, I'm going to run this system. I'm going to spread it out. We're going to go air raid. We're going to do my version of the air raid. We're going to have receivers and a quarterback, and we're going to throw it more. But if he doesn't get those weapons, it doesn't matter. You need the weapons to run the system. So those transfers actually coming in and following Phil Longo and Luke Fickell, those receivers and that quarterback, that now allows you to run that system that you want, which is going to open up the defense, which is going to create space and lanes for Braelon Allen and Chez Mellusi. And then on top of it, you established your interior offensive line by getting Jake Renfrow. Now you have a mauler in the middle to take over for Joe Tippmann. That's going to be hugely beneficial, obviously, for Braelon Allen, for Chez, for the quarterback play. So you solidified your offensive line, and you added weapons to create issues for the defense. They can't load up anymore. I think these additions are going to equal a monster year for Braelon. I remember 2 years ago, we were talking about, is Braelon Allen going to take the step and jump into that Mount Rushmore conversation of Wisconsin running backs? And last year, he kind of looked like PJ Hill, right? Like last year, which PJ Hill was an 1,000-yard rusher, but not in the upper echelon of Wisconsin running backs, right? And I think this year we're going to see the Braelon Allen we kind of expected to see last year. And I'm excited to see that. I think Chez is going to have a really good year in this offense as well. Both have to stay healthy. We talked about that ad nauseum. But I think those two running backs benefit a lot with the transfer additions coming in. Let's talk about another one, Skyler Bell. Now, this may seem counterintuitive at first, right? Because you brought 4 receivers in. How is Skyler Bell going to benefit? I think he benefits from the fact that, I'm a believer in the talent of Bell. I know some people, there's variance on that opinion. I think he's a really talented, explosive young running back that has shown quite a bit of flashes despite an offense that hasn't really been able to feature him or put him in advantageous spots. And now what you're going to see, I think you're going to see Skyler Bell in situations where he's being guarded by the 3rd or 4th defensive back on another team, because you have CJ, you have Green, you have Chimere. Now suddenly defenses have to put lesser athletes on Skyler Bell, and I think that's going to become a mismatch. And if you think about Phil Longo in those North Carolina offenses in his history, he's very comfortable going down the 3rd, 4th, 5th receivers are going to get a lot of targets, right? So he's still going to get targets. And then again, you talk about Phil Longo, what he wants to do, and specifically what he said when he had his press conference. He said, I'm going to put athletes in space and let them run. And that's what Skyler can do. I really think he could be a super dangerous yak receiver. And now he's going to be guarded by defensive backs that aren't going to be able to quite match up with him, because the top tier defensive backs are going to be guarding, I think, Green. I think they're going to be guarding CJ potentially down the road. I think they're going to be guarding Chimere. So I think that depth helps put Skyler Bell in a position where he's going to be able to exploit mismatches. All right, let's get into the next one. Tanner Bortolini. Yes. This was a guy, Tippmann leaves. Bordeaux might have been coming in as the center next year if you don't bring in Renfrow, right? You bring in Jake Renfro, there's your center, there's your cinder block in the middle of that cement wall. And now Bortolini can go play guard, which I think he's more comfortable doing. He's talked about it, and I think he's better there. I think it solidifies the entire interior of the offense line. It creates a huge competition for the other guard spot. We've talked about that between Huber, Brunner, Wedig, and maybe probably a few other ones I'm just in the top of my head missing on. But you're going to have a great competition there. It solidifies Bordeaux as the other spot. Renfro's the center. So I think that Renfro addition not only is great for the offense in general, it allows Bortolini to move into a starting guard spot, which I think is just a really beneficial domino effect. The last one I got here is Dean Ingram. And I don't know where Dean Ingram's going to go, if he's going to stay on the program or not. Certainly there was just some thought, not really based on anything, but just because his dad had been coaching and isn't coaching, he may move into the transfer portal. But I think you get 4 receivers. It allows, if he stays on the roster, it allows Dean Ingram to move back to slot corner, where I thought he was a lot better. I thought it made a lot of sense. I never liked the move to begin with. We were doing the Bucky cast at that time. I was on that podcast. And I remember when this happened, I said, why are you moving one of your better corners to receiver when you don't have any depth at corner, right? So I like that Dean Ingram can potentially move back to corner. I think getting those receivers in the transfer portal allows that. I think they can use more depth there. And I think he's a pretty good short area athlete, a guy who can compete with Jason Maitre, the transfer at that slot corner position. So I think these transfer portal additions really help Bortolini, the interior offense line, the running game, Skyler Bell, and Dean Ingram potentially. All right, coming up, we're going to talk a little bit about get into a little bit about what Luke Fickell's doing with the energy of the program, how he's selling it, and how different it is, why it's important. The Wisconsin Blitz, plus a really cool comment I thought from Tyler Jancy about it. We're going to get into all that and more on Locked On Badgers coming up next. But first, today's show is brought to you by Built Bar. Is brought to you by BetOnline. I apologize. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. It is the industry leader that we go to for our live in-game betting, futures betting. I've talked about how much fun that is to bet with your heart or your head, whichever way you want to go. Enjoy it, do it responsibly. But if you have a feel on a team, put some money on it, have some fun with it, and then follow along. It's a great way to spice up your weekend as well with the live in-game betting. Just because the game starts out poorly doesn't mean you can't get in on the action and cheer for a team to cover or to get back within 21 even. So that's a lot of fun. Grab your mobile device, head to the website today, BetOnline, where the game starts. I want to thank everybody again for tuning in to Locked On Badgers. If you enjoy the show, hit that subscribe button. One of the best ways to really support us. And then when you're done here, go check out Locked On College Basketball. All of the biggest college basketball stories and news in one spot. On Odyssey, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, Locked On College Basketball. Make that your second listen today. All right, let's get into something I think Luke Fickell is doing that's really interesting and incredibly important in today's age of college sports. I'm going to throw a quote up here. You see it on the bottom of the screen if you're on YouTube. It is from Tyler Jancy. Honestly, it's an awesome thing. It's crazy that Wisconsin and Coach Fickell are even doing stuff like that, putting us Chicago guys up on a billboard. So this is in reference to Wisconsin they called it the Wisconsin Blitz, and they put up billboards across Wisconsin. They put up one in Chicago, really as a recruiting tool, a marketing tool, and it had pictures of, current Wisconsin players. The in-state billboards had Luke Fickell and a bunch of in-state kids. It had, I think, Jack Nelson, Hunter Wohler, I'm trying to remember who else. And then the Chicago one had Tyler Jancy, had Muma. I'm trying to remember who else. But it's really important. And I don't want a lot of these shows. I'm about done talking about the Paul Chryst regime and where we're at and where we are now. But it's almost impossible to talk about a topic like this without touching on how night and day different this is from where Paul Chryst and his staff were from a marketing standpoint, right? You have Phil Longo on Twitter, the offensive coordinator, talking about we're getting 7 new weapons. It's raining weapons in Madison, right? Building excitement around the program. You have billboards like this going up across Wisconsin, going up in Chicago. Putting a billboard in Chicago is like staking claim to a portion of that city, right? And saying, we're here, we're going to take prospects, and then putting kids from that area on that billboard, guys from Illinois. Like, that's such a smart and bold and innovative way to kind of push the brand, like showing kids from that area, these are players that came from Illinois to Wisconsin. Do you want to be next? Building that pipeline. And we talked about it before. It speaks to a very intentional, very, very thought out approach. Whereas before it felt haphazard, it felt mismanaged. Now it feels like everything that's happening is according to plan. It's something they've thought out. It's something they've processed, and they have the resources to pull up their vision. It's just so different. And in today's age of NIL, of marketing to athletes, of needing to get boosters and people engaged into the NIL process and selling your program, you can't not do this stuff, right? This stuff is really important. And Luke Fickell is at the center of it. He's talked about he needs to be the best recruiter on staff. You can see him in the billboards. You can see him going to wrestling matches, basketball games, right? Interacting with fans, with former alumni. You can see all these things. And some of this was, I think, in the works with Paul Chryst as well. I'm not going to say all of this is a result of Luke Fickell, but the energy switch has completely flipped around this program, right? And you have to give a lot of that credit to Luke Fickell. Like, there's going to be a spring event again, almost certainly, like some type of family event, open practice. Luke Fickell's talked about that. That had gone away under Paul Chryst. That's inexcusable, right? That's a way to, even if you're getting 10,000 people, 5,000 people, that's 5,000 people you can connect to the program in an era of, again, beating the dead horse here, but in an era of NIL, in an era of you need that type of engagement and support from the alumni, the fans. You have to do those things. It's those spots on the margins that matter now. And if you can get 1% better here, 2% better here, you have to do those things. And Luke Fickell has consistently shown in his very brief time here that he's going to do those things. It also goes to, we talked about the Wisconsin Blitz, the billboard. It goes to the fact that we have a dedicated hand-picked recruiting department now, people who are slotted into those roles because because they're really good at it. They enjoy it, not someone that we just moved into that role because we need to fill a spot, like again we did in the previous staff. So I think it's really interesting. This energy around the program is quite frankly, I it's hard to even describe where we're at. So we're gonna take a couple comments here. That's my big take on the energy and just seeing it unfold before our eyes. With a lot of coaches tweeting about where they're going, with Wisconsin Blitz, with the spring game coming up, with coaches making appearances at games, and the press conferences have so much energy, speaking to their expectations. I think this is all really, really important and really good for Wisconsin. You have to do those things in today's era of college sports. You can't just sit back and let kids come to you. You can't just sit back and hope NIL money flows in. You have to be proactive. And if you're not, you're going to get left behind. We've seen that in places. We were starting to see that at Wisconsin. So, yeah, I think it's really, really interesting. Let's get a couple comments up here. We're going to kind of finish out mostly on comments with the show because I try to, like I said before, get all your comments, at least a lot of them that we can, from YouTube, from the Discord, into these shows, because I think it builds the community, and a lot of your thoughts are really strong. So Tyler Streber says, we haven't addressed tight end in the portal. Are we good with the return of Cundiff, Rucci, and the addition of Ashcraft? I don't know. There is still Barong, the tight end from Notre Dame, is still out there. He didn't commit anywhere, so there's a possibility that I don't know. I don't know actually what happens with him. That's interesting to me that he didn't commit anywhere. That at least that I saw. He certainly didn't come to Wisconsin. I think. Listen, here's the thing with the tight end spot. A couple things that I would point out. And Tyler, thank you for the comment. The first is we're going to use tight ends less. They're not. They're used in Phil Longo's offense for sure. North Carolina showed you that, but there's not going to be a lot of 2 tight end, 3 tight end sets. We're not bringing them in and running multiple, big man formations anymore. So you're going to use less tight ends. I think Cundiff's really good. I thought he was really good when he committed. I thought he was the best tight end in that group. I thought he was underrated. And I think he's shown the ability to be a solid pass catching option for Wisconsin. He just needs to stay healthy. But his injuries are freak injuries. That's the thing. Like, you get more worried if a guy continues to have ankle injuries or hamstring injuries. His injuries are more like he got rolled up on and his leg broke. Like that. I don't think that those portend to future injuries. So I'm okay with Cundiff as a lead guy. Rucci, you also have Cam Large, Jack Pugh. So there's a couple really intriguing options. Large and Pugh in particular were pretty good recruiting wins that, again, have struggled with injuries. A young player to keep an eye on, JTC Greaves, came in last year's class. Really, really athletic tight end. I've said it before, I think he's going to play a big role in Longo's offense, if not this year, next year. And then I've talked about Tucker Ashcraft, the tight end we grabbed this year. He's all of 6'5", 235. I think he could play right away. So I would say tight end is good. I wouldn't say it is great. Excuse me. I wouldn't say it's great, but I think it's good. I think it's good enough. Alien Space, and thank you for the comment, says Cade Yakimelli, Christian McCaffrey. I see some similarities. I mean, I can see it, right? Similar body build in terms of height. Not elite speed, but really good quickness. Good in space. Very, very good athlete. Can do a lot of different things. Can catch the ball. Now, obviously, with Yakimelli, you're trying to look at his high school film and see how it compares to an NFL All-Pro type running back. Christian McCaffrey is obviously the top tier for basically any projection, but I think Yakimelli has the type of skill set that projects to be an all-around, all-purpose back. You can throw in the ball, you can run between tackles, you can get on the edge. I like Cade a lot. And I think the fact that we didn't take a running back this class, I'm telling you, people are talking about, well, it's because we don't use running backs as much, or they're going to move Jackson Aker or Julius Davis. This is only my gut. I think it has more to do with Cade Yakimelli coming over than any of those factors. I think he's an offensive weapon. I think he's an elite athlete. He does it in a different way. But I think he's going to have a role going forward on offense, and a big role potentially next year after Braelon Allen potentially leaves, after Ches Malusi potentially leaves. I like Yakimelli a lot. So I think that's a very interesting comp there, Alien Space. Obviously, no one's going to be Christian McCaffrey, but I don't think you're saying that. I think there are some similarities. All right, we're going to take a quick break, get to a bunch more of your comments, plus talk about a outside linebacker that's coming back that I'm pretty excited for, that I don't feel like Badger fans are sharing my enthusiasm. I have a reason for it. We're going to talk about that next on Locked On Badgers. But first, today's show is brought to you by Built Bar. Built Bar, listen, we got to stop for a second, take stock in where we're at. The holidays were a little rough on a lot of us. We got through it. Now let's eat a little bit healthier. And if you're like me, you're trying to do that, but you don't want to compromise taste. You want to get something that tastes good, 100% chocolate. That's Built Bar. What makes Built Bar so good? For starters, again, 100% real chocolate. Real chocolate. Okay, come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond. I'm not sure how they do it, but these bars taste like candy bars. And what's even better, they're healthy. Only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and 17 grams of protein. So you're getting that stuff that your body needs and not sacrificing the taste. The best of both worlds. And now you don't even need to wait around to get a box. You just have to order these suckers, but they've gone mainstream now. We were in on the foundation, but now you can go to Walmart, you can go to Sam's Club, you can get your Built Bars, head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, grab yourself a box of Built Bars, pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, coconut puffs. They're all really, really good. Or go to Sam's Club, get the 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie batter or churro. Churro is my favorite. You can thank me later. Built Bar, they are incredible. Again, want to say thank you so much for everybody tuning into the show. Really do appreciate y'all. Let's talk about CJ Goetz. CJ Goetz is coming back, outside linebacker, and I noticed there's a bit of a lukewarm reception with Badger fans with CJ. This is similar to when Chase Wolf came back, right? And people are like, "Oh no, he's not going to play, is he?" And I had the same thought with Wolf as I'm having with Goetz. You can't have too many solid players, and gets more so than Wolf, by the way. Wolf at the time, when Wolf came back at the time, we had still had depth issues at the quarterback spot. But Goetz is a different animal. Yeah, and I understand that he is not the physical freak that you're dreaming on. Like he's not the super long twitchy guy or the guy you can dream on with physical skills. Fans, and I'm like this too. Like I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus. I'm like this. We're always looking at the big physical young freak on the bench, like TJ Bowler's this big kid, big recruiting win. When is he going to get his chance? And we see CJ Goetz sometimes, and just that solid veteran, and we're kind of like, I wish we could get some of the younger guys in there. Here's the thing: you can't have too many good players. You can't have too much good depth. And CJ Goetz, I think we would all agree. Let me know in the comments if you disagree. I think we would all agree Jim Leonard and Bobby April knew what they were doing. Right? Those are two very good defensive minds. And CJ Goetz played 46 games for them. Started a bunch of them, right? Had 61 tackles last year, 9 TFLs, 2 sacks. He's not a star, but he's solid. You can't have too much solid. And there's a reason he played all of those games for Bobby April and Jim Leonard. It's because they know he's solid. He's a good player. You can stick him out there. He'll set the edge. He's a good player. That's it. And you need good players. You need good depth. He also provides some connective tissue to previous regimes, to the good defenses we've had. I think he's probably a good culture guy, in-state kid, and he's another kind of validation point that this locker room is also buying into Fickell, right? Players that played for this previous staff are coming back and playing for Fickell now. So I like it. I think it's good on a lot of fronts. It's not a huge needle mover. I'm not saying that. I'm saying be happy that good players are coming back. Depth is always important in a long season. You're going to wear down at spots, and having a player who's a good locker room piece, who's been through the battles, who can be a leader, who has some, again, connective tissue to the previous elite Wisconsin defenses. I think all these are plus marks. I think they're all good checks. So I'm happy Goetz is coming back. I think he gives you good depth. Let's keep going with some comments here. Mr. Simi says, what nose tackle are the Badgers going after in the portal, if anyone? I haven't seen them connected to anybody in the portal for a nose tackle. So obviously, Jamel Howard's out there. I was talking to Rajiv. I think Howard might be able to play early. Keanu Benton did. It's not impossible. So, perhaps Howard. Howard is the early impact guy they're looking for there. Winning Gambler said, Christ and Mertz seem to ruin each other's career. Yeah. I think it was a bad relationship from a football standpoint on both ends. Now, I will say this. Again, this goes back to my first point. The entire offensive ecosystem was broken, right? So I don't know. I just don't know how Mertz could have succeeded in that. And I don't know how Chris could have gotten the offense back to where he wanted with that. It was just all broken. Let's see. David P. Guard needed to replace a couple pieces lost through the portal, did not address the depth situation. Agreed. David, I agree. Guard failed in the portal last year. And the lack of depth you're seeing right now is a direct reflection of them not being able to add that extra piece in the front court they really needed. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying they didn't try, but at the D1 level, this is an end game thing. It's a results thing, and they weren't able to do it. That was Yeah, I mean, I want to have the guard stuff is interesting, right? Or we're going to do a whole show on guard because I think that discussion right now is fascinating in terms of where he's at, what he's done, what his ceiling is. But I agree with you, David. They didn't address the portal well enough this last offseason. Greg Linscomb says, can you imagine other teams trying to hold the ball to keep it away from this Badgers offense? Yes. Think about the role reversal, right? If this Phil Longo offense really gets rolling and we're putting up 30, 40 points on teams where other offenses are now trying to keep way against us, how bizarro world is that going to be? Like that role reversal of Iowa trying to run the ball 38 times to keep our quarterback and our passing game on the sidelines. I'm here for it. It's going to be so much fun. William Brittiniger. I don't know. I'm killing these last names. I know. I'm sorry. William, thank you for the comment. Fickell needs to prove he can coach in the Big Ten. He hasn't had to compete against so many well-coached teams every week. William, yeah, I think that's a fair point. You know, Cincinnati is definitely one of the better teams in that conference. And when Luke Fickell took it over, it wasn't a disaster. I think for the most part, he's probably had the talent / resource advantage against most teams he plays in the AAC. So it is going to be a step up for him as well in the Big Ten. Now, I think he's proven he's a good coach, and we're certainly loading up talent wise. But I think it's a good point, William. Like it's going to be a step up for Luke Fickell and his staff as well coming into the Big Ten. Brett McDonald, going back to last year's transfer class, we had a show on that. He gave it a D plus. Only 2 out of 6 contributed. Only 1 significantly. Transfers come in with the expectation to contribute significantly. Otherwise, they would most likely stay at the previous school. He gives them a D plus. I don't know. I think 2 contributed significantly. Yeah, I think Kamoila 2 and Jay Shaw both had significant contributions, Brent. But I hear your point. I don't think it was a great transfer portal class. I think I gave it a C plus. However you slice it, I don't think it was a great class, but I'm a little higher than you are on that. Leroy James commented that was unwatchable basketball, talking about the Wisconsin Penn State game. Changes, just like football used to be, changes were made to bring excitement to the football program. I hope the same happens to the basketball program. Yeah, going back to that conversation with Greg Gard, it is interesting, right? Where I've mentioned the parallels between these two. A lot of people talked about Christ and his system, and that inhibits your ability to recruit. And again, it kind of becomes a chicken and egg thing. Guard has a little bit of that going on as well, where I think he's a little stubborn with his system, which I think does impact his ability to recruit. And at times, like Leroy pointed out, it does lead to unwatchable basketball. So we're going to do a whole Greg Gard thing. I appreciate the comment, Leroy. I agree with a lot of what you're saying there. All right. With that, I do appreciate everybody tuning in. We're going to call that a show. Bunch more content coming up. Really do appreciate y'all on Wisconsin, and let's keep it going.